Hey, this is Rue, and today I'm going to be comparing and ranking the 5 agency options in Mars Horizon. If you aren't familiar with this game, I have a review up which I'll link below. First up, we're going to look at agency traits. This video is going to assume you leave the default traits. If you use custom agency traits, then you can make pretty much any agency overpowered and you can skip this section. ESA has traits oriented around playing nice with other agencies, increased chance and rewards for joint missions, and a bonus to friendly diplomatic relationships. The last effect is pretty minor, but the other two can impact the game, particularly if you invest in buildings to further boost them. Playing a cooperative game like this can give you huge discounts on missions and be a fun way to play. While good traits for the player, the AI doesn't really know what to do with these, and an AI-controlled ESA is rarely a threat to win the game. Next up is NASA. NASA's traits are pretty mediocre. The first trait, achieving a top 3 milestone, granting extra support, looks good on paper, but it's usually not worth going after many milestone bonuses, especially on higher difficulties. The second trait, allowing additional contractors, is good. It actually unlocks one of the best contractors in the game, which we'll talk about later. On the other hand, NASA's last trait, doubling the size of the astronaut recruit pool, is straight up bad. Crewed missions, and the lunar landing in particular, are kind of a noob trap, and even if you want to play that way, this trait just isn't that helpful. Overall, NASA's traits feel more suited for a lower difficulty play style in which you're chasing lots of high milestone finishes. The Soviet Union is next. Their first trait, changing invalid launch windows into suboptimal windows, is probably the single best trait across all 5 agencies outside of custom settings. This is a game-changing trait, saving a tremendous amount of time and opportunity costs the other agencies have to eat while waiting for launch windows to open. The Soviet Union's second trait, cheaper astronaut hiring and upkeep, is just okay. Like we talked about with NASA, astronauts, or I guess these would be cosmonauts, are less important than you would think. Still, this trait is way better than the NASA version because it directly reduces costs. The last trait, no support penalty for failed missions, is also just okay. In all likelihood, unless you're really unlucky or playing poorly, you shouldn't have that many failed missions. So the impact from this trait is going to be pretty small. Overall, the Soviet Union's traits are very good, and an AI Soviet Union is consistently one of the top 2 threats to win the game. Next up is China. Their first trait, a reduction in research costs for buildings, is very good. While you're unlikely to finish the building tech tree, you will need to go into it significantly, and flat bonuses of any kind are strong in this game. The second trait happens to be another flat bonus, this time to building construction costs and upkeep. This one is also good. Throughout the game, you'll spend a lot of money on base building and upkeep. China's last trait is the weakest, offering full Phase 1 science reward for failed launches. Just like with the Soviet Union, if you're playing properly, you shouldn't have many failed launches at all. Overall, China's traits are very strong, and an AI-controlled China is the other main threat to win the game. Which brings us to the final agency, that of Japan. Japan's traits are kind of in the middle of the pack. The first trait, achieving a top 3 milestone granting bonus science, is okay, but we already talked about how milestone bonuses are less impactful than you'd think. The second trait, extra funds reward on lucrative type missions, is good. Lucrative missions are usually worth taking even without this trait, so having this makes those missions even better for Japan. The last trait, doubling science bonuses for building adjacency, is pretty weak. Building adjacency bonuses are honestly a pretty minor part of the game, and this trait doesn't really change that. Next up, we have contractors. Despite the game not really telling you, having access to good contractors can make or break your game. First up is NASA. The base NASA contractors are pretty bad. Red Giant is probably the single worst contractor in the game. Decreasing build time by increasing build cost is the opposite of what you usually want to be doing. XR avionics can be useful in certain situations, but they're pretty rare. If you keep the default NASA traits, you do get access to 3 better contractors. Martin Spaceworks is excellent, and the other 2 are more situational. Next up is the Soviet Union. Both of these contractors have limited use cases. In general, you don't want to reduce science reward or launch reliability. China's contractors are okay. Trading vehicle build time for launch reliability is good, but the amounts here are pretty small. 20% build time increase for just 5% increased reliability is only sometimes worth it. As we'll get to in a second, ESA has the better version of this. Star Sail Group trading science rewards for support can be useful sometimes. ESA's contractors are very good, probably the second best in the game. Messier Aerospace is the better version of ChingSat, offering much more reliability and only slightly more expensive in terms of build time. Green Moon is more situational, offering support at the cost of payload reliability. Which brings us to Japan, the agency with the single best contractor in the game, Astronautica, minus 30% build cost at the price of just 20% extra build time. This contractor is almost always worth using from the earliest stages of the game until near the end. If you pair Astronautica with the composite casing component, you can get minus 40% vehicle build costs, which can basically carry games. This contractor is so good it's often worth allying Japan just for access to them. The other Japanese contractor, Ito Industries, is okay but more situational. Next up, we're going to talk a bit about payloads and vehicles. For the most part, differences in this area are mainly cosmetic. Each agency gets some cool looking unique rockets and payloads, especially in the early game. However, the important statistics for these payloads and vehicles, cost, lift capacity, rewards, etc., are extremely similar across agencies, as you would expect for balance reasons. The major exception to this rule is the Chinese lunar lander. It's massively lighter than the other agencies, 8,000 kilograms to 45,000 kilograms, which makes it much cheaper and easier to complete. China can land on the moon with a medium launch pad and a long march rocket. All the other agencies need a large launch pad and expensive heavy lift rockets like the Saturn series. On higher difficulty levels, the Chinese lunar landing is one of the few crewed missions even worth doing. Now let's talk about one more difference that seems small but can actually affect how you play: each agency's base map. Each agency has you starting in the middle of a map supposed to represent each agency's main launch site, Cape Canaveral, Baikonur, etc. As you build additional buildings, you have to clear out obstacles and work around fixed terrain blockers. While none of these differences will make or break your game, they can slow you down and cause you annoyance, especially in the early game and if you're trying to get adjacency bonuses. Here's an example of a China game in which I built several buildings and am unable to expand without spending a massive amount of money. The NASA map has good cheap expansion around the starting buildings. Trees are way cheaper to remove than rocks. There are expensive rocks around the perimeter, but by the time you get there, it's less of an issue because you have more money by that point. There are 2 smallish water terrain blockers. The Soviet Union gets some expansion paths, but you're definitely more cooped up than NASA at first. They get 3 terrain blockers that can't be removed, 1 water and the 2 lighter colored rocks. China's immediate base area is the worst in the game by far. You only have room for a couple buildings before you have to spend a fortune removing rocks. If you're playing China, I recommend getting advanced demolition tech to make this manageable in the early game. China gets 3 terrain blockers, 2 ponds, and a tall rock to the north. ESA gets great early expansion. The entire north of the base is just trees, and there's also room to the east and the west. The expensive rocks are around the perimeter, which is exactly what you're looking for. There are 2 terrain blockers, 1 pond, and the darker colored rock to the west of the HQ. Japan gets the coolest looking base, as well as the only one without any permanent terrain blockers. It has a different map shape than the others, with this square area sticking out along the coast. That square happens to be the perfect size for a large launch pad, which is pretty cool. As far as early expansion, you have a good amount of room to build to the northeast and southeast before you hit large rocks. At the end of the day, base maps are not a huge part of the game, but if you're not careful, it's easy to get cooped up on some of the rougher maps. Lastly, I'll go briefly into starting diplomacy. Diplomacy is not a huge part of the game, but it does affect contractors, and it's good to have at least 1 ally and 1 antagonist to get the bonuses to science and income. NASA's default diplomacy is pretty good. They start antagonistic towards the Soviet Union, which is good for an income boost, and friendly with ESA, who have the second best contractors. It shouldn't be hard to get ESA to allied with an event prompt or with a joint mission or 2. The Soviet Union starting diplomacy is solid. They're antagonistic towards NASA, which is good for the bonus, and they get the smaller science bonus for being friendly with China. What makes this worse than NASA's position is that ESA has better contractors than China does. China's diplomacy is okay. They get a friendly bonus with the Soviet Union and the smaller competing bonus with Japan instead of the full antagonist bonus. Unfortunately, the Soviet contractors are not good. ESA's diplomacy is even worse. You don't want to be neutral in this game. You get bonuses on either side, but none in the middle. And being friendly with NASA means being close to bad contractors again. Which brings us to Japan, who starts at competing with China and neutral with everybody else. Just like ESA, this is a bad setup because you don't want to be neutral with people. Of course, these are all just the default values. If you want, you can hit randomize until you find a diplomatic setup you like. The strongest setup is probably to ally Japan or ESA for contractors and have an antagonist among the others. So, what does that bring us to as far as overall rankings? If we're sticking to default starts, no custom traits, China is probably the strongest agency in the game, with the Soviet Union coming in a close second. You could make a case for the Soviet Union at 1 and China at 2, and I wouldn't argue. I put China in the top spot due to a combination of strong flat bonus traits that help across the entire game, as well as a straight up and balanced lunar landing mission. The Soviet Union gets the second spot due to the launch window trait being one of the best in the game. The areas of weakness for both these agencies, contractors and base maps, are just not as important as traits. Besides, bad contractors can be fixed by just allying Japan or ESA. In third place, at least in player hands, I put ESA. The bonuses to joint missions and cooperative play can actually be pretty strong if you follow that playstyle and build complementary buildings. ESA is good across the board, if not exceptional in any one area. Good traits, good contractors, good base map. In fourth place, I put Japan. Their traits are decent, but they have the best contractors, and I like their base map a lot. It's unfortunate that one of the best parts of the Japanese agency, the contractors, can be picked up by anybody else with just a little bit of diplomacy. Of course, this leaves us with NASA in last place, which is ironic considering in real life NASA was the first to the vast majority of what the game considers milestones. But as far as in-game, NASA just doesn't have any of the bonuses other agencies get. The best thing they have is probably the bonus contractor. Overall, I did these rankings from the perspective of a player on higher difficulty and following optimal strategies. That involves not chasing milestones and avoiding crude missions until the end of the game. If you're playing on a lower difficulty, then it's not hard to win with any of these agencies, and you should just pick the one that looks coolest to you. If you want to roleplay NASA and the Apollo missions, knock yourself out. Anyways, that about wraps this one up. I hope you found this useful, and I'll see you in the next video.